Hello YouTube. This is day 4 of the morning meditations, and today I have some funk that I'm going to be speaking about, and that's the funk of the creative process, and trying to understand what exactly is going on in the creative process, and how we as human beings can best be in tune with that force that is so mysterious. Something that I realized is that the creative process, if you look at it through a psychoanalytic lens, it's the connection a man has to their anima, which is their inner feminine. And if you look at it through a woman's lens, it's often the connection that she has to her animus, her inner masculine. This was proposed by Jung and corroborated by extensive research in psychology, at least through the psychoanalytic perspective. And I think a lot of artists intuit that, especially when they refer to their art as a feeling. Because I think if you've ever been in that process where you're creating something, that flow-like state, it doesn't feel like it's coming from the mind. It feels like it's coming from a place very, very deep in one's soul. And art stems from the unconscious for that reason. And now I think in the past, I've personally had this struggle between this mind and feeling like state. And that can be the cause of some creative blocks. Because if you're trying to create something from a sphere that you've never properly integrated, or that you've never actually been able to access properly, what you end up doing is sort of forcing the needle with your creative works. And I don't know if you've ever tried to force the needle with while trying to create something, but it never ends up being the prettiest picture. Now, the problem too is that a lot of our education system in the States and the world in general does not encourage failure, and it does not encourage experimentation and play. And oftentimes, if you are involved in the creative process and you're afraid of making mistakes, if you're afraid of going down the wrong path, if you're afraid of the possible outcomes or the project that you're working on not becoming exactly what you had in mind, then that can be a creative block in of itself. So there has to be a real willingness to experiment and play, and that goes against the logical mind. And in some sense too, that also goes against the education system of many people who have been in public schooling for 18 years, perhaps more, doctorates and things of this nature. And then you also have the work environment that isn't very conducive to harboring a creative spirit, with this clock in, clock out nature, and cubicles and different companies and things of that nature. So that's to say that we have a lot of forces in our modern world that go against the creative spirit, that do not harbor creative spirit, and it becomes even more difficult if one was alienated from that spirit in the first place, if through your upbringing that wasn't fostered within you. And so my personal struggle with this has always been how to let loose of expectations for myself in terms of what I really desire in my art, and actually having being in tune with that force, because it's not an easy thing for me in particular, but I think for many people, sometimes they can struggle to be in tune with that force. And the proof I have for this is look at all the art programs across the world. I think on one level, they're there to give people time to focus on their art. But on another level, there's also this sense that art is a craft that needs to be developed. And while I agree with that, the approach of the modern world to this question is, hey, there are teachers that can teach you how to do that. And while that might expedite the process, I'm very wary that that anyone could really, really give you some sort of key to expressing yourself. And while I don't think anyone believes that, something about the very nature of a lot of these not workshops, but art platforms make it seem as if this wasn't something that was going to be you searching for it, but it's going to be something that's inherited almost. And I think to an extent, like artists of the past, they did teach others how to create art, so there was an element of that, but I still think that it's a self-search in a way. And something I've been thinking about recently is like, okay, well, if we know that the modern world alienates people from an expression of art because of the regimented lifestyles that we live, what is a conducive environment to allow one to express themselves in their utmost capacity? And I think that there are going to be certain spaces that are going to allow for greater expression of the soul. Look at this kid. Look at this cat. I want to go say hi to this kid. Like, for example, this. I may see this cat. I may play around with this cat a little bit. And then I may be inspired to create art. Come here, kid. Come here, kid. Come here, kid. Oh boy, where are you going? Where are you going? That's a dirty kitten, I'm not gonna lie. That's the one dirty kitten. She looks like she's been out here for a while. Is it a she? Are you a she? Alright, I'm gonna stop playing with the kitten now. Actually, it's not even a kitten, it's a cat. Why am I calling it a kitten? Anyhow. Where was I? I totally lost my... See, this is the problem with me. I see a cat and I'm just like, creative process? What's the creative process? I don't know anything about that. Back to the creative process. The environment. Having a conducive environment for the creative process. I think that is an element that I've never really considered before, because I think if you think of the world and your inner world as being a blockage point, then it would make sense that if you want to change that inner world, the outer world has to corroborate that change. So I think finding yourself in places, in spaces that inspire you to create is a very astute observation that someone I know told me the other day, and that I'm starting to think about and consider on a deeper level, like what that really means and what that entails for my life. And a recent dream image I've had is me boarding a bus to go somewhere. And it's always like I struggle with the collective, and then I find a bus, and then I board the bus. So what would this metaphoric symbol really be, this bus? This bus that typically, like, it was a school bus, and school buses can be related to, like, childhood, safety, you know. And I think that the reason it's a school bus in particular is because that relates to our inner child. And it gets back to the thing that I feel like I've neglected in this creative process. I've always thought of it as a connection between me and my anima. But if you really think about it, the creative process is also a connection between you and your inner child, you and your playful spirit. And I think if you consider the creative process as a connection between you and your playful spirit, then is it not the case that children would play, right, more or less in given circumstances and situations? Like, you put a child in front of a TV in a closed room where there's nothing but a TV, they're probably not going to play to the same extent as if you put a child in a room with a bunch of children at a daycare center with a bunch of toys. And so the environment does have an impact on the creative process in a very deep level if you just look at the inner world dynamic that's going on there. And the fact that I'm seeing this school bus image reoccur in the dreams is also telling me that there's a part of me, part of that inner child, that desires to go and create in a safe environment, an environment that allows for that expression. And perhaps not the environment that I currently live in. But seriously though, if you look around here, see how serene it is? You know, you get out in nature a little bit. It actually feels very conducive to creating. Maybe it's more about the spaces that you inhabit. So those are some of my thoughts on the creative process. And, you know, to sort of summarize it, putting yourself in a mental space that allows you to best express that playfulness, to break the boundaries that I think society has set for us, and also to find things in the outer world that can better inspire us and fuel that creative process. And one last thing is, too, the sort of feelings that I think a lot of people have that, and I know I struggle with these as well, with our own capacity to create art, you know, whether or not it's how great we are at creating it or how bad we are at creating it, or perhaps our limitations, feeling that we might reach a limit or feeling that we've already reached a limit. I think these sorts of feelings are counterproductive to the artistic process, because the artistic process isn't one that's externally oriented. It's not oriented in basically how people might receive our art. You know, it has to be oriented in your own being, right? It comes from a place very deep from the soul. And so if you really orient it in other people and what this possible limitation is and your own fears and anxieties, that's going to be an inhibitor to the growth and expression that you might have in the artistic process. So bringing it back to really self-expression is key. I'm going to leave you guys with that. Talk to you guys next time.